But I'm concerned because after 4 years from when the Task Force on Local Government Elections tabled its report, under 2 premiers, 3 ministers, one of them twice, 2 deputy ministers, the BC government finally delivered twins last month. 2 pieces of legislation that are very nice, but provide little, if anything, in the way of serious reforms. They've done all the easy parts from the task force report, parts that really, quite frankly, amount to little more than administrative housekeeping. They've cracked open the champagne and patted themselves on the back. But we have a concern with the process, because they did something in the dead of night that should concern us all. Last September, the government released a white paper on local election reform. In that white paper, they stated, and I quote, "The UBCM, Union of BC Municipalities, subsequently passed a resolution to retain a 3-year term of office. The provincial government has agreed not to change the term of office." A few days later, the largest single special interest group on the issue, local politicians, at a UBCM conference in Vancouver, changed its mind. Again. With respect, the UBCM has been all over the map on this issue, but a few days after the government's discussion paper was released, its white paper was released, they decided now we want 4-year terms. The government didn't say anything that they were going to reconsider this issue. They didn't put out a media advisory to say that we now want public input on this. They simply did a U-turn in the dark of night, and the largest stakeholder on the issue, the public, had 0 say on the issue. I want to touch on 2 aspects of what I consider to be less than fair commentary from the BC government. We often talk about the City of Vancouver having a spending nightmare when it comes to local elections. And the BC government has rightly pointed out that in 2008, municipal candidates in the City of Vancouver spent $4.5 million. Last time out, it hit $5.3 million. And unless something is done, it may very well hit $6 million this year. Now that's in a city with 419,000 registered voters in the last election. And I want to do some comparisons, if I may, with other cities, because in its discussion paper on electoral finance reform, which it released in November, the government played some very dirty tricks with some of the numbers. In Ontario, Ontario has virtually a blanket set of rules, and I'm not going to get into the minor details of those rules, but it basically works out to 85 cents per registered voter. Keep in mind, most cities in Ontario have wards, so that when it goes down to the councillor level, you're not talking about the large, full size of the city. In Mississauga, which is 1,000 voters shy of Vancouver, the limit for a candidate running for mayor would be $319,664 in 2010. Naheed Nenshi, who just successfully ran for re-election in Calgary, in a city with 250,000 more voters than Vancouver, self-imposed a limit on himself of 65 cents a voter, and actually came in below that at 57 cents a voter. The limit for a donor in Alberta across the province is $5,000. Rob McDonald wouldn't be able to get away with $960,000 in any community in Alberta, any community in Ontario where the cap is $750, unless you're running for the mayor of Toronto, where the cap goes up to $2,500, and in Quebec, the cap is $300. Naheed Nenshi's average donation to his campaign was below $750. Absolutely no comparison with what we've seen in Vancouver. But the BC government, to come back to what I said a moment ago about playing some little tricks with some of their rhetoric, likes to say that this is a Vancouver problem, that it's just the city of Vancouver that we have this problem in. And in November, as I said, they released this discussion paper on election spending. And I sent an email to a journalist the first night I wrote it. And I said, if I was a poli-sci professor, I'd give this a C-. People should be very concerned about the quality of the information in that report and the analysis of that report. For instance, the authors claim that after having looked at 500 candidates' reports from 2008 and 2011, the candidate spending overall, quote, is fairly low, unquote. To what? Who knows? They didn't say. They compared all of the BC data on a per resident basis and all of the other provinces on a per registered voter basis. So in BC, they included newborns, non-citizens, yet all the other provinces don't include newborns, non-citizens. They only include who's on the voters list, which is the same rules, by the way, at the federal level. But I wanted to see if the BC government was really right on this issue, that it's only a Vancouver problem. Victoria has 65,500 registered voters in the last election. Dean Fortin, the mayor, was re-elected in 2011, and he spent $77,000 to get re-elected. Doesn't seem like a particularly large sum, but hold on a moment. Prince George, 52,709 registered voters. Sherry Green, the new mayor of Prince George, beat out the incumbent. She spent $81,200 to do that. So let's look at what the limits would be in Regina, Saskatchewan. The mayor, a candidate running for mayor in Regina, has a limit of $62,635. A limit already below what the mayor of Victoria spent to get re-elected and the mayor of Prince George spent to beat out an incumbent. One small problem. Regina has 157,269 registered voters, twice the number of Victoria and 3 times the number of Prince George. Why the government concludes that overall spending is fairly low, quite frankly, is beyond me. What happens, because one thing, as we all know, that the government has failed to do is legislate spending limits. What happens when you do? Well, Montreal's a very good case in point. I think many of you will be familiar with some of the Charbonneau Commission exploring municipal corruption in Montreal. And they decided one of the ways to get around it was to bring in serious caps on spending and serious caps on donations. And what happened? The candidates had to talk to voters. They actually had to debate each other. There were more debates held in the last municipal election in Montreal than they have ever had in its history. They had candidates running for mayor on the Metro every morning, taking the Metro to meet with voters. And it's interesting because I looked at the spending of the Big Four, and I have to add this ad-lib for Adrian. Bet you never thought it'd be the Big Four when I talk about a political party in Vancouver. But how did they spend their money last time? It's actually kind of interesting because we've always focused on who gave the money and how much they spent, but not on how they spent it. According to the elector organization reports for the Big Four, 17% of the spending in 2011 went to research and polling. 25% of it went to paid advertising, in print, on radio, TV, and the internet, and another 27% went to salaries. Only 11 cents of every dollar went to brochures for voters. If you bring in strong spending limits, you force politicians to be more creative and imaginative and actually going out to talk to the people who are meant to vote for them. I'm going to close with just a couple of takeaways because there's something else on that donation side I want to touch on. Last time out in 2011, if you put all of the successful candidates together in Metro Vancouver, 83.7% of their donations came from corporations and unions. People who can only vote with their checkbook, and they voted $2.93 million worth of times. And if you zoom in on one community in Metro Vancouver, Port Coquitlam, 7 successful candidates in Port Coquitlam in 2011 raised $71,600. $1,200 of that actually came from people who could vote for those 7 candidates. One of the things that Quebec has done, and I'll close on this, is that they've also said in addition to only being able to give $300, you can only give if you can actually vote for the candidate that you're giving it to. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent.